French farmers have been protesting the prospect of a free trade deal between the EU and South America's Mercosur. They say it would undercut their own agricultural output. Now, France's President Emmanuel Macron opposes the agreement, but a majority of European allies are for it, including the likes of Germany and Spain. Andrew Hillier has the story.
French farmers are virtually unanimous in opposing the Mercosur trade deal. Both the EU and Mercosur reached an initial agreement back in 2019, but it was never finalized after opposition from farmers and some European governments. The free trade deal aims to boost commerce between the European Union and the 5 countries that make up Mercosur, namely Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay and Bolivia. It would gradually eliminate customs duties on trade between the 2 blocs. The EU exported 45 billion euros worth of goods to Mercosur in 2021. French government officials say it would allow the import of an additional 99,000 tons of beef and 180,000 tons of poultry. But French farmers say South American exporters would have an unfair competitive edge. Farms are bigger and producers are less bound by strict environmental and health regulations than their EU counterparts. Wages are also lower than in Europe, and that could force prices down for European farmers.
In the end, it's like unfair competition. Our products are very standardized, very controlled, very closely monitored, and products from all around the world can arrive with completely different standards of production.
The French government, racing to extinguish a growing protest movement, also opposes the deal. It's urged other EU countries to refrain from signing it. Analysts say it could accelerate deforestation in the Amazon rainforest by up to 5% per year. The deal has united politicians, farmers and environmentalists in a rare common front opposed to its ratification.
Well, with us, he's a former U.S. diplomat. Chris Hegadorn is Adjunct Professor of Global Food Politics at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Thanks for being with us here on France 24.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
First off, can you reassure those French farmers? Are they correct in staging their picket?
Look, French farmers are going to defend their interests, as they always have done, very vocally and very effectively. I wouldn't expect them to do anything else, but this is an EU broad agreement. They have been under a lot of pressure over the last few years, so I think there's a sense of insecurity that the unknown is quite scary. The past few years,
because we saw a few years ago when there was a deal on milk.
Right.
How badly the French farmers got hit when dairy prices went through the floor. It feels like, for them, a race to the bottom when it comes to standards on sanitary and health on beef, which they have to apply and are more lax in South America.
No, and I think they are right to bring these issues up. I think the ideal outcome would be that the European position would actually raise standards. The question about deforestation is on a lot of people's minds, and the delay currently in Brussels, 1 year. There's efforts to delay it further. You know, those of us who are in this food politics sector are really concerned that we have a lot of work to do to feed the world. The numbers are going up, hungry, malnourished, and perhaps this isn't the right direction that we're seeing coming out of this deal in some ways on standards and environmental protections.
Yeah, because there were farmers' unions from the left and the right, and they're all against it for different reasons, as you just spelled out. There were German farmers who crossed the border in Strasbourg and picketed alongside their French counterparts, but Germany and Spain are in favor of the deal. Why?
Germany as a country, not necessarily all the German farmers, but Germany sees benefits for a trade deal, right? These trade deals are huge. They cover everything, certainly beyond agriculture. So German car manufacturers, service providers, many others are set to benefit quite significantly from a trade deal. So overall, this is what Brussels is looking at, the big picture. Obviously, if you're looking to continue being in political power in Paris, you have to take into consideration a very fraught political scene with agriculture interests very strong, very prominent, and very vocal. So it's a question of whether you're looking at the big picture or more parochial interest.
Is it, again, I get back to the original question, is it an existential threat for French farmers? French farmers are saying many of them will go under with this deal.
My own opinion is no, that it's not, that this is a deal that will be implemented over a number of years, that the amounts of beef, for example, are relatively small in volume terms. I think there is a sense that farmers are under stress and under pressure, and we've seen that through COVID-19. We've seen that through higher import costs as an outcome of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I think there is quite an insecurity. Farming, as we know, is one of the hardest industries to be in, and they've had their backs to the wall for some time. So the concern is real. Whether that plays out in terms of loss of jobs, loss of welfare, I think there are safeguards in place that will protect them. And I think it opens the door for a lot of French agriculture exports. This is where that balance has to be seen in the bigger picture, right? Wines, cheeses, liqueurs, the high value add. And this is where French industry will actually stand to benefit quite significantly.
All right, so there's pain for some and gains for others.
Exactly.
Chris Hegadorn, a few years back, there was this trade deal between the EU and Canada. It got over the line, but boy, was it a heavy lift. People said that's the era of free trade deals is over. And yet here we are today. And by the way, I don't know if you heard, there's a new president in the United States who doesn't like trade deals.
President-elect, yes.
Is this the last one, the Mercosur deal?
I wouldn't say it's the last one. I think there will be some interesting, bumpy road ahead. I was in touch with a friend at WTO in Geneva today, looking to see what the prognosis is. But it's definitely going to be bumpy. I wouldn't say it's the last deal, but this is a huge, huge deal, right? This is 25 years in the making. It's 800 million people in these markets. This is significant, and I think if you look at what happened in the U.S. with NAFTA, Canada, Mexico, U.S., huge disruptions that weren't really thought through at the time when they were being negotiated and implemented. But you see the impacts over time that changes is significant, and a lot of the industry, heavy industry, manufacturing industry in the U.S. was gutted, moved south to Mexico. Those do have major social impacts that I think politicians are wise to be thinking about over a longer term.
The names were changed, but the one you referred to in North America, it was never really rolled back, was it?
No, hardly. No, it wasn't.
So again, we heard our correspondent Ian Kamazin in Rio. They're talking about the G20.
Right.
There's this Joe Biden pledging a record $4 billion for the World Bank's Poorest Countries Fund. Meanwhile, at the UN Climate Summit in Azerbaijan, they're desperately trying to reach a deal on climate finance this time.
Right.
There's a sense that they're kind of trying to front load all the financing before Donald Trump comes to power. Is that going to work?
I would think that maybe some of the lessons that come out of this election in the United States show that despite the $2 trillion stimulus package by the Biden administration, on top of what was spent over near $500 billion with the COVID-19 response. In fact, the inflationary pressures were unleashed. The prices that went up, that's what the electors were saying was the reason many of them voted for Donald Trump, because they saw these prices go up and not come back. Their wages were relatively stagnant. Things are coming back to a more relaxed economic situation now, but it's too late, right? That overspending, the amount of money that the U.S. has put towards domestic stimulus in the light of its national debt, I think Trump is definitely going to make some big changes on both trade and finance.
But it feels like these are sort of 11th hour deals that they're working on at the G20, at the UN Climate Summit. To what effect? Are you able to get around the United States? What's going to happen after January 20th?
Yeah, well, this is the million-dollar question. I think there will be some major confrontations coming up. I think this may, in fact, antagonize this deal, the EU-Mercosur deal, may in fact antagonize Washington with the new administration coming in. And I think it will affect overall relationships. I think the Europeans need the U.S. at this point tremendously in light of the security threats and defense expenditures, et cetera. I think everyone sees where Trump is going. He has a pretty good track record of following up on what he says on the campaign trail. So I think there's a bumpy road. I think the WTO is going to be in the crosshairs for Washington. I think the effort to get the African group is trying to get the WTO DG a second term and changing the rules to do this in advance of the Trump administration. So I think there's just going to be a lot of turbulence coming up. I think these trade deals will be reviewed very
Can
carefully.
multilateralism work despite an isolationist U.S. president?
I think it can, but I don't think the U.S. can walk back on its obligations to be present.
It did for the Paris Climate Accords first time around.
That's true, and they very well may back out again, and that threat is being repeated by others, as you know, including from Argentina. So it doesn't mean that progress can't be made, right? So the U.S. will continue to, I think, progress, particularly on renewable energies, particularly on its agriculture. It has to sell its agriculture abroad. Domestically, Trump is relying on farmers, but farmers need to get their product overseas, where their livelihoods and incomes depend on this.
All right, many thanks, Chris Hegadorn, for being with us here on France 24.
Pleasure.
Stay with us. There's much more to come, more news, plus the day's business and sports.